we doing today?
Good, good.
Good morning.
Today it's a nice day because we have a new member. We have Helena. She's actually also in Android. So it gives me the impression that only Android people is interested in the book circle because everyone here is from Android. Um, but anyways, welcome Helena. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
So yeah, I'm going to be skipping one of the stuff. I'm going to start actually from the back. I always like to start, as you know, from the ones that are more or that are closer to us. How about if we begin with know your IDE? How many of you know the shortcuts of IntelliJ or Android Studio? At least some of them, besides copy and pasting. Not that much. Well,
Mhm.
But it depends on the keyboard because when I try like to comment a taste, it's a little bit hard on my laptop. It's
yes.
Control, Shift, and that streak. But when I do it here, it doesn't work.
Yeah, it
You
depends.
can
It
change
depends.
that though.
Yeah.
You can
It
change it.
Okay.
depends. The
Okay.
Swedish keyboard, I have to say, it's terrible. So if you have Swedish keyboard, change it to English. It's a little bit
Okay.
more user friendly, uh, in my opinion. So my laptop has the Swedish one, but I don't use that one. I have an external one, and that one is in English. Not only, I mean, the keys are in English. So, anyways, I can recommend that. What have you noticed? I think it was with the group of Katerina and Helena. I think it was with your group. Was it in your group that someone asked me how did I do some stuff and I showed the was it your
Yes.
group, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So exactly. I put that little thing on purpose for Enrique and Murad. You know, I think you have seen it as well, that every time I do a shortcut, there's a little pop-up that appears. And that's a plugin that I installed exactly for that. So that because I know students sometimes say, "Hey, Humberto, how did you do that? How did you copy the line so quickly? Or how do you put so many cursors at once?" Well, you can see it down there, and so on. So I highly, highly recommend to explore the IDE. It's going to be your best friend, and for you to be efficient, shortcuts help a lot. I can actually also recommend. I don't have the link from in the top of my head, but if you do a quick Google search, you put IntelliJ shortcuts, and you will have a huge table with all the stuff. You don't need to memorize them all, but at the very least, the ones that you use more often. Any thoughts on that? Any thoughts? Yeah, Enrique, go ahead.
There's actually one plugin for IntelliJ IDEs that have it's called Key Promoter X. So whenever you do something with the mouse or not with a shortcut, it will tell you on the right, like, hey, there's a shortcut for this. You missed it X amount of times. So with that one, I learned the refactor one, which is Shift F6 and some other ones that I commonly use. But it's really helpful too. Because it's kind of annoying in a way that it's like, oh, you did it with the mouse. Oh, you did it with the mouse. You can do it with the keyboard. You can do it with the keyboard. So it's super to learn
Handy.
the shortcuts is quite fun.
Yeah. Another thing that I can recommend, whenever you find yourself doing something over and over and over again, for example, clicking the play button, that's something that you do many, many times. As soon as you notice that you're doing something, find a shortcut. Do spend if you need to spend 1 hour trying to find that stuff, spend it because 1 hour that you kind of spend finding the shortcut is going to be way more than many more hours that you're going to be wasting clicking the up. And by the way, you can also configure both IntelliJ and Android Studio to have your own shortcut. So, for example, I have my own shortcut for stopping the app, and I have my own shortcut for opening the terminal based on my preference. So you can configure your own commands as well. So keep that in mind. Again, so that you become more effective and more proficient in that sense. Not related to knowing your IDE, but also I highly recommend uh, becoming good at typing, like without having to be looking at the keyboard necessarily. That's another skill that comes in very, very handy. I provided to the Enrique group, I provided a website that I used, and I can put it on the group from Caterina Helena. It's a website. There are many, by the way. This is just the one that I used, in which it kind of trains you how to place your fingers on the keyboard, and it's like levels, and each level it's focused on a letter or a set of letters, and then it gives you, it's very, very interactive, and it shows you like how many mistakes you made, your speed, and so on. And then what I used to do, I spent every morning when I came to the office, I spent 20 minutes. My first 20 minutes would be doing that stuff, and 20 minutes for many weeks, many months start adding up. I'm not going to say that I am the fastest typist, but I'm definitely much better than what I was before a few months ago. And I can highly recommend that also. You become more comfortable at typing and not relying on the mouse all the time. Good. Know well more than 2 programming languages. I know some people here have a background in programming. Besides Kotlin, which all of you know or are learning, anyone else knows any other programming language?
No.
Or have worked with any other programming language?
Yeah.
Which one have you worked with, Enrique?
C++ when I was a teenager, and then I did a bit of TypeScript like recently for the QA stuff, but
Mhm.
not much after that.
Okay. And Katerina, I believe you as well, right?
Yes, so I know Java and C#,
Mhm.
but it's like really near to the Kotlin. But also I know HTML, so it's like another way.
Not the
So
same.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
I
So
I
it's
would
not
I
the same level of yes.
I
Yeah.
agree that Java and C# are very similar to Kotlin. Probably you noticed the similarities. I still
Yes.
believe Kotlin is better. It's a little bit more, I don't know, I like it better. There are certain
Easier,
things.
easier.
Yeah,
newer.
It's like
yeah,
Python, so it's like you like what you think you'll write is the same.
exactly
Yeah.
correct. So it's nice. It doesn't require like the semicolon and all that stuff, and it's smarter. I don't know, but yeah. However, and what about you, Helena? Do you know any other programming language, or have you tried any other programming language?
Actually, some years ago, I think in 2017, I learned just the introduction in JavaScript.
JavaScript. Aha, interesting. Okay,
It was
yeah,
just
that's nice.
introduction in 2 weeks, I think. And
Aha, okay.
now, actually, I am indeed like studying a new language, like
Exactly, correct. So right now you're studying another one besides Kotlin, or only Kotlin?
only Kotlin.
Ah, okay, nice. By the end, you're gonna become an expert, so no worries. I would say if you ask me, no one asked me, but I'm gonna answer anyways. In my case, I think I began with C actually. It was in the university. I had no choice. We did a little bit of C. Then I remember my second language was C++. Then we in the next class it was Java, and then everything revolved around Java because by that time I was already doing Android, and back then Kotlin was not yet out. So I was doing Java, and after Java, I stayed for Java for a long time. Then I said everyone was using Python, and I said I need to learn this thing. So I did Python, and I think that around that time, Kotlin also came out, and the company where I was working, I was already in Sweden. They said, okay, we need to do Kotlin. And at that time, I'm like, I don't really want to learn a new language. Everything is so comfortable at the moment. I don't want to. So, anyways, learning Kotlin was the best thing I could have done, to be honest. And yeah, but the book here, this chapter says something important that I have mentioned this to all of you before, and I want you to really take it seriously. It's not only about learning many languages, because as Katerina already mentioned, even though she has experience with a number of them, they are so similar that in terms of mindset, it's almost the same mindset when you program in C++, .NET, or Kotlin, for example. What this particular author, or yeah, our author says in this article is that it's not only about learning different languages, but also learning languages that have different paradigms. So, for example, the C Sharp, Java, Kotlin, they're all part of this object-oriented programming paradigm. So the way you think is pretty much the same. The syntax, okay, varies a little bit, but the way of thinking is the same. However, if you were to learn let's say a fully or complete functional programming language, not only you need to learn a new syntax, but you have to learn a new way of thinking altogether. And it is in that shift in mindset where learning actually occurs, because it forces you to learn in a completely different way. So when you know no programming and you start, it is difficult because you have to start learning or thinking in a specific way. Then you know programming, let's say object oriented, given that it's the most popular, and then you go to functional. Suddenly, it's not that you start from scratch, but you basically everything switched around. Everything is different because it's a different mindset. Yeah. And that helps a lot. I have not prioritized it because I have other priorities, but I definitely want to learn a purely functional programming because of that, not because I have necessarily the intention of now leaving Kotlin and doing functional programming, but of this aspect of challenging my mind and challenging the way, a different way of thinking about problems. And probably after, I don't even have to become an expert in that language, it will influence the way I even program in Kotlin. It will make me solve problems in a different way, because the benefit of Kotlin is that it also has functional programming features, which is nice. So think about that. You don't have to do it now. In fact, I don't want you to do it now because I wanted to focus on the current education. I'd rather you spend the most of your time further developing. But for example, Murat, Enrique, that you're almost around the corner to being done. That could be a challenge for you, a new opportunity, a new something to do while you're looking for a job or even in your spare time. Getting a functional programming language, anyone, to be honest, any of them. Any thoughts on that? No?
Functional is interesting. Of all the paradigms that are out there, functional is like the most interesting for me. Looks really complicated in a way, but so simple in another way. So it's like, I want that as well.
Yeah. And here's an interesting thing. Go ahead, Caterina. You don't want to.
You don't
It's
want
not
functional?
a simple functional language.
Uh-huh.
They're not simple. So like we have this SFCF50, yes, from Harvard University. They started from developers. They started from telling about C, and after they tell about Python, probably you see it, they well known that course, yes. So every year they developed a new program. So yes, it's it's not user friendly at all. So all you do is in terminal. So it's not easy.
Yeah, it depends. Definitely, there's it makes you change your way of thinking for sure. But it's definitely a good challenge. In the beginning, everything it's very difficult, but then you can definitely become better at it. But it's a good way of challenging yourself and getting to know. It will help you on whatever language is your main language. It will help you in a good way. I mean, it cannot harm you at all. But yeah, that is important. And again, as he says, it's not only about the syntax. It's not learning the syntax per se. It's learning the mindset. And what I was going to say, sometimes I know when the students, they have a background in another programming language because it reflects on their solutions. You might be wondering, Berto, but how? Let me give you the simplest example. This is the most common one, the for loop. Both in Kotlin and in Python, let's say I have a list. I just say for item in list, and that's it. But if you were, say, in, at least I have not used them in a long time, but on other languages, you have to do like for I in I less than length of the sentence, I plus plus, for example. So you're not really looping the elements of the list, you're looping over the indices. And then you access the elements while looping. That is very normal in other languages, but although you can do that in Kotlin and Python, why would you do that? I mean, you can just loop the entire thing directly. And when I see that, I said, okay, either someone did this for you, and that someone has no experience in Kotlin, or you have experience in other programming language, and you don't want to learn the features of Kotlin, and then it's either one or the other. But anyways, that is how I know, okay, they have experience in programming. And usually I say, but why did you do it that way? And I get a variety of answers. Sometimes they say, no, I ask a friend who knows about programming. And I said, does your friend know Kotlin and Python? No, they know C++ or whatever. And they say, that's how you do it. And I said, yeah, I can tell he has a different paradigm, or not paradigm, a different language. So anyways, think about that. Like, each language has their own features, and it's very good, important to learn those things. Go ahead, Murad.
I wonder here, okay, because you mentioned that it's good to learn another paradigm because it's gonna change our mindset of programming. But it is possible to use both the object-oriented and functional paradigm to build an app.
If you're speaking about specifically Kotlin, Android, Kotlin has functional programming features, so yeah, you could do it.
Okay.
Now, Kotlin is not a purely functional programming, so you cannot do pure.
Okay, but still,
but you can implement
both of them.
Yeah, okay. But again, the language needs to support the feature. So, for example, I don't believe C++ supports functional programming features. I don't know. I have not used that language in a long time. So if they don't support it, then you cannot do it.
Okay.
So it has to be a feature of the language.
Okay.
Good. Let's go to the next one. This is one that students sometimes, especially the ones that are more into a little bit more techie, they always come to me with this, but I cannot do this in the education because otherwise I will have one student in the class. And that is, know how to use the command line tools. Yes, okay, let's put it like this. They have a place. Let's put it like this. They have a place. I am not, there's developers, pure developers. They are not against the IDE or against GUI or graphical user interfaces, but it's like they feel proud that they know the terminal. You know, it's a badge of honor, and it's all right. But I'd rather be freaking productive than have a badge of honor that tells me that I can do that. So there are certain things especially with Git, for example, there are certain things that they are significantly easier in the GUI. I mean, you cannot tell me that it's not easier. There are certain things, however, that are easier in the terminal. That is also true. There are certain things that are easy in the terminal. And it's also true that you should know how to use both. So even though the GUI exists, you should know how to do from the terminal, git status, git add, blah, 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 git commit, git push, all that stuff. You should do it, or you should know how to do it in the terminal as well. Now, we do not do it in this course for, I think, obvious reasons. If it's so complicated to share screen on Microsoft Teams, imagine how complicated it's going to be for me teaching people to use commands. I mean, it's going to be impossible, especially because you have a terminal. The terminal from Windows is not the same from Mac. So it's going to be a chaos. That doesn't mean that you should not learn it. That doesn't mean that you should not learn it. You should learn it. For example, the best way of starting with Git, learn the different Git commands by the way, which you can use them directly from Android Studio or IntelliJ, and so on. So it is important. Don't get me wrong. It is important to know how to do it. I use them sometimes, not for everything. There are certain things that I prefer the GUI. There are certain problems that I say, okay, this is a terminal problem or this is a GUI problem. And then depending on that, I go one or the other. So yeah, another thing that I recommend, you should know how to use the Unix terminal, the command line, so that you can do basic things like navigating the directories, creating folders, creating a file, using Vim, at least the basics of Vim, which is a text editor. Basic commands. You don't have to, I mean, you can if you want, you can be an expert on that. I have friends that, oh my God, like they know this stuff. I'm like, hey, when do you use this stuff? Yeah, they say they use it, but I have never had the need of using it as much, but they love it. And if I have questions, sometimes I ask them, hey, how do you do this stuff? And then they send me a huge command. I'm like, okay, thank you. But anyways, the point is, there's people who love it, and that's fine. And but you should learn how has anyone gotten like, hey, I want to learn the terminal a little bit. Has anyone gotten into that?
I spent the last 2 days installing Linux on my PC.
Mm.
And then I spent like 3 hours trying to make my keyboard work on Linux on my PC.
Okay.
Then I spent like 3 hours trying to clone the Android homework using Linux on my PC because I had like an authentication problem. So I have to, at the end, the only thing that I could do was create an SSH key
so
on my
that's what you
GitHub
need to do.
account and use the SSH link.
Yeah.
So
That's how you do it.
Well, it should work the easy way because all the other repos work like that. I clone all my repos.
But were they public or private?
All my repos are private.
Okay.
The only two that I had problems with was the Kotlin one and the Android one. And I
so my repos, you're telling me that my repos are the problem.
But I didn't have a problem with the Microcement one. So I think it's something with the Git education thing that sets a flag somewhere on the repo. So yeah, it was super fun. And now I have Linux for coding. So I will try to code in Linux. So there's a lot of terminal, it's clunkier, but it does compile faster than Windows by a long shot. In Android Studio, like the apps compile like at least 10% faster, which is
no, but it's nice. I mean, I encourage all of you to learn a little bit about the terminal. Do anyone use here Mac or Linux, or mainly Windows? Okay, mainly Windows. Yeah, I don't use Windows, to be honest. I have a Windows because I have to make sure that whatever I do on my computer works on the student's computer, and because certain things look one way on my computer and on the Windows, it turns out that they look differently. You have noticed that from the videos that I do it in both. But anyways, I recommend learning the terminal and so on. I remember, just a side note, when I went to my first job, they asked me, okay, Humberto, which computer do you want? And I said, okay, do you have the option to give me a Mac? They say no. Okay, then give me a Windows, but I need to change that to Linux. Otherwise, I'm not even gonna consider working here. I'm not gonna be using a Windows at all. So I ended up, I received a computer, and the first thing I did was turn it on to make it a Linux. I didn't even use the Windows stuff, but yeah, it's good. It's good. Nice. Any thoughts on that? Any comments? Any thoughts? No? By the way, something I can recommend to all of you, and this is not only for, let's say, learning the terminal. I'm gonna put it on the Discord. Udemy.com. Are you familiar with what that is? Udemy.com. Enrique is familiar, and the rest? Murad is familiar. I will put the link. So basically, Udemy is a place for finding courses, like short courses. Yeah. And you can find pretty much anything you can think of, IT related and non-IT related. So let's say that you're interested in learning, okay, I'm going to learn the terminal this week. I mean, there are many ways of learning, don't get me wrong, but one that I can recommend, go to Udemy, find a course. It's usually like $9. Buy the thing, 1 week, boom, you learn your stuff. And if you don't like it, you can actually return it. So there are many, many things that I have learned via Udemy. So for example, there's a program called Sketch. It's like Photoshop, but more towards building UI stuff. Sketch, I said, I need to learn this thing. I found a video. I learned, 2 weeks or something like that, learn what I needed. I wanted to learn, this was a while ago, I wanted to learn about backend. And I said, find a video, learn backend, and so on. So I have not hundreds, but like 10, 20 courses that I have bought from Udemy to learn different stuff. $10. I mean, that's a fika. So instead of spending canel bular and few coffee and stuff, I'm getting some knowledge. Yeah. So look into that. Look into that to learn different stuff. Yeah. Good. And last but not least, one of my favorites, keep the build clean. Sometimes I download the project of the student, I run it or start building it, and I see all the warnings. And I'm like, how is a student not stressed about all this thing being yellow and being like this, because you open the file and it's yellow everywhere, you know, the squiggly yellow lines. And I'm like, doesn't it bother the student, all this? I mean, it's like that when I was reading this chapter, one thing came to my head or to my mind, this concept of keeping your room clean. It doesn't bother people that the room is terribly, you know what I mean? So at least I like to keep my room clean. I try my best, and I try to do the same with the code. I don't like to see squiggly stuff. I don't like to see the wrong formatting. As an example, I don't like to see a bunch of warnings. Here's the same thing. But I have to admit, it is very easy to ignore warnings, because since they do not prevent your code from running, you just say, I have better things to do, so leave that there. I will come back to it later. But that never happens. Can anyone relate to that?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's like all the time. But sometimes I have to live with the yellow one because
Yeah.
it's telling me, oh, you have to use this particular one. And I'm like, I don't want to use that particular one. I want to use the one that I wrote because that's the one that I can read properly. Because
Yeah.
sometimes the refactoring that they do is not
Hard
legible
to
to
understand.
not legible to
Yeah.
me. And so I'm like, no, I'd rather have it on yellow so I can read it. Or sometimes if I'm repeating it, I keep one yellow and keep the one on the bottom or on the top the other way so I can read it both ways. So
That's an interesting point, because that's what he mentioned here. At the end of the day, we, the developer, we have control over the code. And in this case, you mentioned a good point. The system is suggesting you a refactoring, but you consider that refactoring is not good because it's not readable, it's not understandable. I don't know. And that is where he comes and he says, I want to ignore this because I don't believe that this warning, it's supposed to be a warning. I don't think it's an improvement that I want to do. So you can suppress them in both Android Studio and IntelliJ, which is the same with Detect. You can suppress some of them. There are certain checks from Detect that I say, no, I don't think this is a problem. I want to keep it like that. So ignore and don't bother me. But you cannot, of course, ignore everything, because then what's the purpose? Yeah. So for Caterina and Helena, Detect is something we look in Android. It's about formatting your code. Actually, your homeworks, I believe, I don't remember if I did it, but your homework is configured to accept that. But I don't speak about that in the first part of the education. It's too much information. But anyways, it's something to format your code. It's a tool that formats your code automatically. And sometimes it bothers you, like, hey, you have this problem. No, it's not a problem. And so you need to fight with it. By the way, just a little parenthesis. I have in Python, there's also this formatting. I use two of them. And you know what happens sometimes? They fight between themselves. In what sense? I run one tool and it corrects. Then I run the other one and it undo what the other one did. And then I had, because one is supposed to remove the only focus on the imports, the other one do imports and the whole code. And they are not following the same rules. So unfortunately I had to, let's say, delete or stop using one of them, because they would fight all the time, and my code then would never be perfect because it will satisfy one but not the other. Then I do satisfy the other, but it then, yeah, so it's a problem. But yeah, it was annoying. Anyway, sorry, going back to this. When you have your apps, your projects, do not ignore the warnings. Look at them, and by the way, they are a source of knowledge. They are a source of knowledge, especially in the Kotlin part. You're writing your code and you see that it's all yellow. Read the warning. Hey, why is it yellow? And then you learn stuff. You literally learn stuff about, hey, I didn't know I could improve the code by, I don't know, removing this part. Hey, I didn't know I could do this. So read those warnings. They are very, very useful. Has anyone here, Katerina and Helena, have you used the warnings as a source of knowledge? Like, have you learned new things by clicking the light bulb and, yeah, it automatically do the correction? Have you learned new stuff by following those?
No, actually, sometimes I just accept the suggestion.
Yeah,
And
but after accepting it, do you realize, oh, this is interesting, I didn't know we could do this? Like, have you had that?
Usually the IntelliJ is very new for me. So when I use function, usually I try to open the source to know how it works. I think you showed this in some video.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So I try just to understand the functions, but yeah.
To be fair, also, you guys are in module 102, which is the first module of programming. So you haven't done like much programming, but as you move through the modules and you do more programming tasks, and you're gonna have more warnings, you're gonna correct them, and then you're gonna have more opportunities for learning. So yeah, it's normal that, I mean, we're still kind of early. What about you, Murad and Enrique? Have you used that feature to learn new stuff? Yeah.
All the time. Every time I see a yellow thing and I'm like, okay, let's see. And then I see the suggestion, or maybe it's telling me, oh, you should use this one, mostly in Android now. Oh, you should use this way, you should use AppCompat or something like that. And I'm like, okay, what? Then I have to go to the documentation. What is AppCompat? I don't know what AppCompat is. And then I'm like, and at the end, I don't like AppCompat because AppCompat is not API 24 friendly. So no, I end up at the end after like 1 hour of reading, and no, I keep my yellow squiggly line at the end. But yeah, it's you have to read those. Definitely, you have to read those.
Nice. Very good. Very good. Good, everyone. Really happy to see all of you here. Hopefully you liked it today, Helena. Hopefully you saw a little bit how's that dynamic. It's very casual. It's very, we just speak a little bit about everything. And now the time is up. So let's keep it up to here, and I will see you either lecture or help sessions, okay? Have a good one, everyone. I will be putting the links in the Book Circle channel, the one of the typing and the Udemy, so that you can take a look into that.
Yeah, put in our channel again also.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
I will. Hey, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.